Hey, level casters, get ready for a fascinating journey back in time. Today, we're going to explore a very important and complex part of world history, the Vietnam War. It's a story with many layers, showing us about conflict, courage, and change. We'll look at what happened, why it was so significant, and how it shaped the world we live in today. Don't worry if you don't know much about it yet. We'll break it down together, making sure you understand all the key points. This wasn't just a war, it was a struggle for independence and a major event in the Cold War, a period of tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. Our story begins in a country far away, Vietnam, a beautiful land in Southeast Asia. For many years, Vietnam was a colony of France. This means France controlled Vietnam, its resources, and its people. But the Vietnamese people wanted to be free. They wanted to rule themselves, to have their own country without foreign control. This desire for independence was very strong. A leader named Ho Chi Minh emerged, leading a group called the Viet Minh. They fought against French rule. After many years of fighting, in 1954, the French were defeated at a place called Dien Bien Phu. This victory was a huge moment for Vietnam. It seemed like independence was finally here. However, things got complicated quickly. International powers, especially the United States and the Soviet Union, became involved. They had different ideas about how Vietnam should be governed. The world was divided into two main groups: capitalist countries, led by the US, and communist countries, led by the Soviet Union. These two sides were in a Cold War, meaning they didn't fight directly but supported different sides in conflicts around the world. Vietnam became one of these battlegrounds. After the French left, an agreement was made in Geneva, Switzerland. This agreement divided Vietnam into two parts, North Vietnam and South Vietnam. The North was led by Ho Chi Minh and was communist. The South was supported by the United States and was anti-communist. The idea was that after a few years, there would be an election to unite the whole country. But this election never happened. The United States feared that if an election took place, the communists would win, and all of Vietnam would become communist. This was part of the domino theory, an idea that if one country in a region became communist, others would follow, like falling dominoes. So, the US started to support the government in South Vietnam, providing money, weapons, and military advisors. The South Vietnamese government, however, was often unstable and unpopular with its people. In North Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh and his government wanted to unite the country under communist rule. They supported a group of fighters in South Vietnam called the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong used guerrilla warfare tactics, hiding in jungles and villages, making it very difficult for the South Vietnamese and later American forces to fight them. As the situation grew worse, the United States became more and more involved. American presidents believed it was important to stop the spread of communism. In the early 1960s, the number of American military advisors in South Vietnam increased. Then, in 1964, an event called the Gulf of Tonkin incident happened. There were reports that North Vietnamese boats attacked U.S. naval ships. This incident led to a resolution from the U.S. Congress, giving President Lyndon B. Johnson more power to act in Vietnam. This was a turning point. After this, the U.S. began sending large numbers of combat troops to Vietnam and started bombing North Vietnam. The war officially began for America. The conflict quickly escalated, meaning it became much bigger and more intense. American soldiers found themselves fighting in a very difficult environment, facing a determined enemy who knew the land well. The war in Vietnam became a long and brutal conflict. American soldiers faced many challenges. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army used tunnels, booby traps, and ambushes, making traditional warfare very difficult. The climate was hot and humid, and the terrain was often dense jungle or rice paddies. Back home in the United States, the war became very unpopular. People saw images of the war on their televisions every night, and many began to question why America was fighting there. Anti-war protests grew larger and more frequent. Young men were drafted into the military, meaning they were forced to serve, which also fueled the protests. Important events shaped the war's course. The Tet Offensive in 1968 was a major turning point. North Vietnam and the Viet Cong launched a series of surprise attacks all over South Vietnam, including on the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. Even though these attacks were mostly defeated by American and South Vietnamese forces, it showed the American public that the enemy was still very strong and that victory was not close, as their government had claimed. This made many Americans lose faith in the war. The war continued for several more years, with heavy losses on both sides. The U.S. tried different strategies, like Vietnamization, which meant training and equipping South Vietnamese forces to fight the war themselves, allowing American troops to withdraw. However, the fighting continued, and peace talks in Paris were slow and difficult. The human cost of the war was immense. Millions of Vietnamese soldiers and civilians died, and tens of thousands of American soldiers also lost their lives. The war also caused deep divisions within American society, between those who supported the war and those who opposed it. It was a time of great change and uncertainty for everyone involved. Finally, in 1973, a peace agreement was signed in Paris. This agreement led to the withdrawal of all American combat troops from Vietnam. It was a moment of hope for peace, but the fighting between North and South Vietnam continued. Without American support, the South Vietnamese army struggled. In April 1975, North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam. This event marked the end of the war and the reunification of Vietnam under communist rule. Saigon was renamed Ho Chi Minh City. The Vietnam War had a profound and lasting impact on everyone it touched. For Vietnam, it was a long struggle for independence that finally succeeded, but at a terrible cost. The country was devastated, its land scarred by bombing and chemical defoliants like Agent Orange. It took many years for Vietnam to rebuild. For the United States, the war was a painful experience. It was the first war America lost, and it led to a period of deep reflection and questioning about its role in the world. The war changed how Americans viewed their government and military. Veterans returning home often faced difficulties and a lack of support. The Vietnam War also influenced international relations. It showed the limits of military power and the complexities of Cold War politics. It demonstrated that even a superpower like the United States could not always achieve its goals through military force alone. The war's legacy continues to be debated and remembered today, teaching us important lessons about conflict, diplomacy, and the human spirit. It reminds us of the importance of understanding different cultures and perspectives, and the terrible consequences of war.
The Vietnam War was so complex.
Yes, it had many difficult parts.
I learned a lot about the reasons for it.
The Cold War played a big role.
And the domino theory was important.
It shaped U.S. foreign policy.
The French colonial history is key too.
Vietnam wanted its independence.
Ho Chi Minh was a strong leader.
He fought for his country's freedom.
The division of Vietnam was confusing.
North and South had different ideas.
The U.S. got very involved later.
They sent many soldiers there.
The Tet Offensive was a big event.
It changed public opinion in the U.S.
Many people protested the war.
It was a very unpopular conflict.
The war finally ended in 1975.
Vietnam became one country again.
It had a lasting impact on everyone.
That was a great lesson, Levelcasters.
I agree. Keep learning, Levelcasters.